All right. Well, hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And welcome to this exciting webinar between Alkira and AWS. So my name is David Klebanov. I head product marketing for Alkira. And today I have a distinguished guest with me, Adam. Adam, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, David. Thanks again for having me today. Everyone, my name's Adam Blackington. I am a partner solutions architect with the Global Startup Program at Amazon Web Services, and I support David in all of his efforts here.
All right, that's great, Adam. Yes, we definitely AWS is one of our very key partners. We're really excited to do this kind of wonderful things with you and change the networking together, right? All right, so today we're going to talk about, like I said, networking, right? And how AWS and Alkira are joining forces to really bring that agility into the cloud networking. And we're also going to touch on security, because we all know that security and networking are kind of tied at the hip. So we're certainly going to touch a lot on networking, but we're gonna also talk about security, right? So the agenda for today, we're going to have kind of 5 sections. We're going to talk about very briefly about the cloud networking and maybe just networking in general, challenges around that briefly. Then we're going to talk and touch on AWS global infrastructure, how AWS is really changing the game with sort of vast infrastructure deployed all around the world. Then we're going to talk about what we call an Alkira Network Cloud, which is a new notion in networking for the cloud era. Give a bit of a recap about what Alkira Network Cloud is and what are the elements of the network cloud and how that all comes together. Briefly, not too much, and really focus today on the Alkira solutions for AWS and really walk you through all kind of different things that you can do as far as your AWS deployment is concerned, when you are leveraging the Alkira Network Cloud platform for your networking and security needs. And at the end, we are also going to do a live demonstration with a little bit of a twist. So stay tuned for that coming at the later part of the presentation. It sounds like a plan, Adam?
Sounds like it, David.
All right, I'm going to be plugging you into these conversations. We're going to be tag teaming, talking about there's no like your slide, my slide. We all here for our joint customers and make sure they get the best experience out of this.
Absolutely, I'm excited.
All right, we'll make it fun and interactive. All right, so let me touch really quickly on kind of the state of networking today. And when we talk about the state of networking, we're not just necessarily talking about cloud networking, which is really what kind of the topic of the conversation today with our AWS counterparts, but we're really talking about networking in general. So how does networking look today? And obviously it's a very broad topic, and here's just a very small sample of what are some of the things that are biting you when you are doing networking today, right? So we know that networking for the on-premises environment and networking for a cloud environment and a networking for multiple cloud environments is oftentimes a set of disjoint solution. Some are really targeted for on-premise environment with some touch of the cloud. Some other are primarily targeted at cloud environment with some rudimentary support for on-premise environment. And what's really needed is kind of a cohesive approach of single networking experience across the users, sites, clouds, edge computing environments, and whatnot. Now, alongside with these disjoint solutions, we're really thinking about, well, how are these solutions coming together? And many times they involve 2 kind of principles. The first one is a capital hardware investments, right? And we see those happening all the time through upgrades of the CPE equipment to support the latest and greatest technologies, or a notion of using co-location facilities to provide high-speed cloud on-ramps. So there's definitely an element of a hardware investment that many times comes in networking, and particularly cloud networking. And alongside with these hardware investments, obviously, after the hardware has been sort of installed and racked, you need to configure it, right? And the software configurations that are involved in this hardware provisioning are many times pretty cumbersome and pretty complicated. right? Requires really deep expertise and really takes a long time to do, right? And of course, long is a relative term, but when you're talking about cloud, where things are measured in minutes, right? I need to achieve a task in minutes. So when we're saying something that takes you days, weeks, and sometimes months, it's absolutely obviously unacceptable, right? So we're all striving to be at the spot that we greatly simplify the software configurations. We remove the necessity for hardware investments for new hardware investments, right? In order to make this sort of a networking experience way different, right? And after you've gone through all these efforts of hardware and software, work and the expertise needed and the provisioning times, that many times your back is against the wall with some capability-wise, right? You may not get the full set of capabilities that you were expecting as an enterprise and the full richness of those capabilities, right? And at the end of the day, what it really translates to is that we can all kind of agree that the traditional networking has not really kept pace with an agility that the cloud and the cloud brought in, right? When we, Adam, of course, you can attest to that, is that AWS is by far the leader in cloud, and the ability to bring this networking experience in be that synergetic with the agility that AWS brings into the mix is absolutely imperative for the overall success of what enterprises are trying to achieve in the cloud. So I think that's definitely something that is imperative.
What do you think, David? Like, what are some of the difficulties, or what is one of the biggest difficulties that you see that customers are having when they're trying to at least initially get things started from a networking perspective inside of AWS?
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys have built a pretty nifty set of capabilities, right? One thing that we are consistently hearing from our customers is that you need expertise, right? A cloud world behaves differently from the on-premises world, right? And the architectures and the capabilities and the approaches that were applicable for building in on-premises networks, branch networks, wide area networks, data center networks, those principles, those good old networking principles of decades ago, they are not applicable or not entirely applicable to the cloud world. And what we're hearing from many of our customers is that they're really finding these discrepancies between the level of expertise, the level of understanding, the level of knowledge that they had in their on-premises environment doesn't really transcend into the cloud environment that easily. So I think if we were to kind of single out one single thing that we feel that customers are kind of struggling with is really that the notion of agility and networking agility in the cloud or for the cloud, and right alongside that is the understanding that many organizations are lacking into how these networking elements really work in the cloud, because cloud really changes the way that networking operates, because it's a different set of principles that exist in a cloud. And so maybe you want to touch a little bit, Adam, about what is AWS bringing from the standpoint of your infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks for that that intro there. From an AWS global footprint perspective, right? Like, what we're noticing is that a lot of our customers and users are obviously global, right? And we want to help them deliver a fast and secure network in the best way that we possibly can. And this is why we continue to invest in our global network. We're 25 regions strong with 81 availability zones, and these continue to grow every day, every year. We're always announcing, new fiber, new regions, new availability zones. We have edge network locations all over the world, right? And you know what? Let me touch on that for a second. A lot of people, I often get asked, what is an edge network location, right? Like, how can you have over 225 edge network locations if you only have 81 availability zones? So, edge network locations don't necessarily sit within availability zones. They sit all over the world. These can be anything between entry points into our network. They can also be CloudFront endpoints, right? Where people are pushing out their content to be closer to their users. And now with things like outposts, right, where you can have them at your very own colo facility, right? And then you also have AWS local zones, which offers sort of like a limited service offering, not the entire AWS selection, but also bring you a little bit closer to home sometimes. We have 108 AWS Direct Connect locations across the world, and these are growing every day. We also leverage various different AWS partners who specialize in extending Direct Connect to data centers that perhaps we don't have a presence at. We have redundant 100 gig Ethernet fiber between all of our facilities. The network is encrypted. And most interestingly enough, and this certainly isn't true for all cloud providers, but we do operate our own network backbone, right? We have our own autonomous system. We have our own IP blocks. We do all of the network architecture ourselves.
Right. That's awesome. I mean, we truly appreciate kind of the global footprint that you guys have and the infrastructure that you've built, because our notion that I kind of touched on in the last slide, our notion of this networking for the cloud era really relies on the fact is that cloud providers like AWS, who really leads the pack, really has enabled this vast infrastructure that companies like Alkira can now leverage in order to provide services to the end customers. So they kind of get the best of both worlds. They have the AWS capabilities and the global reach, and they have the Alkira as kind of a provider of this next generation networking and security services for the cloud era.
Exactly. So and let's ask the simple question: why have a global network? Security is obviously one of the big reasons. We want our customer traffic between AWS regions to traverse our infrastructure where we can provide the best customer experience. So we don't want inter-region traffic to be impaired by any sort of internet routing issue. All commercial region to region traffic traverses the AWS global network, except for China. Availability is obviously another sort of important part of this whole thing. We can't rely upon internet providers to have enough capacity to support our demands for things like cross-region traffic. So we take ownership of our infrastructure, and that includes building the right amount of capacity to service customers and building redundancy into the network, so we know we can handle things like fiber cuts. Obviously, like touching on the performance aspect here, we can control what fiber routes our customers take between regions and provide consistent performance as it relates to things like latency. So if you have a lot of traffic, going out one path, we can dynamically route around that to ensure that there is the least amount of latency for all of our users. And lastly, with touching on sort of user proximity, right? Like our global network enables us to do some really cool things with how we connect to the internet. So we can increase the surface area of the Amazon Internet Edge footprint to scale out our external network capacity at a global scale. We can overcome localized bottlenecks or hotspots and route around failures on the internet by having so many internet ingress and egress locations globally.
Yeah, that point is really, really important, and it really strikes a tone with us as well with Alkira, is because this user proximity and the fact that you guys have built this global footprint, which has a presence of your network, these edge locations that are close to the users, so we can minimize this unpredictable last mile internet, as good as it is in many places, it's still not as predictable and as consistent as a purpose-built, global footprint network with all the attributes that you've mentioned, right? So we kind of want to leverage the best of both worlds. We leverage internet last mile to get onboarded into the infrastructure, but make that last mile as short as possible, because we want to start giving sort of the best user experience. And this proximity that you mentioned is really paying dividends in what we're doing as well. So that's great. Maybe you want to touch. On, and I'll move you to the next slide, right? But maybe you want to touch a bit on that kind of the principles behind your networking, because you guys have really over the years invested a lot in AWS Cloud native capabilities. So I'm curious to know a little bit more about kind of your cloud native capabilities, because we leverage a lot of those cloud native capabilities for an Alkira service, which is a cloud native service, right? So those capabilities that you guys have been pushing forward and developing over the last aggressively over the last several years are really powering what we're doing from an Alkira solution standpoint.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. But while we're talking about our infrastructure,
Sure.
Let me take a second to sort of share that we understand that you as a partner, and then both as the end customer, have an important business to run, right, and rely on us to be available. So we're always working really hard to build in fault tolerance in our design and operations, and just with a little bit of insight, right? Like, as you saw earlier, the 25 regions, 81 availability zones. Each region also has 2 independent, fully redundant transit centers that allow traffic to cross the AWS network and connect to the global network. Each availability zone has multiple physically separated data centers with redundant power network connectivity in buildings. And we're, again, always adding more and more here. From a cloud native perspective, right? We are constantly doing so much, right? Like, we're always developing new products that can help facilitate customers' cloud journeys. Whether it's Cloud WAN, which is coming out soon, or it's leveraging things like Transit Gateway to help facilitate connectivity. There's always something new that we're adding, that we're developing, that we're helping customers grow, leveraging those cloud native tools.
That's awesome. Yes, we definitely kind of appreciate what you guys are doing to enable this networking capabilities in your cloud, so we can leverage those as well, and some places enhance those in order to provide service to our customers. So that's great. Let me maybe switch gears a little bit here and talk more about what is it that, because we mentioned it quite a few times, that we leverage your vast infrastructure, right, and your networking capabilities in order to operate our service. So what exactly is our service? So I mentioned that in the beginning. What we call an Alkira Network Cloud is in fact a class of products that we're operating, and our own solution in that space is called an Alkira Cloud Services Exchange, which is kind of, you see depicted in here. And what it really shows you is a full-featured end-to-end networking solution for the on-premise networking needs, but also for cloud networking needs, and extending to the edge computing needs and multiple cloud providers. So really a very holistic networking solution for the enterprises. And there's a couple of things in here that are worth noticing, at this moment, and I'm going to double click on some of those later on in the presentation. But the important thing is you see in the middle here what we call an Alkira cloud backbone, which is exactly why when you were talking about the AWS's global footprint, it's really kind of brought a smile to my face. Is that this cloud backbone is really kind of leveraging the vast footprint of the cloud providers, such as AWS, in order to operate the service. And when you talked about being close to the users, that also brought a smile to my face, because those hexagons that you're seeing in there, which are the cloud exchange points, these are in fact a point of presence. The Alkira operated virtual, built in the cloud points of presence that are located as close as possible to the on-premises environment, which is outside of the cloud. Obviously, the cloud is right there, and if you're looking at connecting things in the cloud, then of course that's easy. But when you're thinking about how to connect things outside of the cloud to the cloud, this proximity of those cloud exchange points, because of the vast footprint of the infrastructure, of the underlying cloud infrastructure, really minimizes this last mile, right? And once you're onboarded into the backbone through this Alkira cloud exchange points, then basically everything that resides, everything that connects to those global cloud exchange points is available to you. And those are, of course, in AWS workloads, and those are the SaaS and internet applications, and very importantly, the network and security services that traditionally have resided in a data center, but since cloud and cloud workloads are becoming such a dominant force, these network and security services residing in a data center make little sense now because of the importance of the cloud. So uplifting those network and security services, and maybe Firewall is by far the most predominant example of those services, uplifting that service from being in the data center, which is no longer the center of the universe, and being uplifted into the cloud, and more specifically into the Alkira's cloud exchange points that are in the cloud. And uplifting those services there really allows us a degree of control over how the services are routed to, how the lifecycle of the services is managed, and how the high availability and scale of the services is handled. It really gives us an unprecedented level of control around these services once the services are uplifted from the traditional data centers into this Alkira's cloud services exchange platform. Right. So the combination of the cloud backbone with relies on this vast global cloud provider infrastructure, and the cloud exchange points that are in cloud, born in the cloud, software entities that are points of presence, and the things connected to them, and the services connected to them, that kind of holistically really creates this end-to-end networking and security experience for the enterprises. And of course, in order to operate this environment, you have the portal where our customers and our partners are connecting to, where some of our customers and partners are leveraging APIs and SDKs in order to operate that in a more programmatic manner. So all of that is an operational angle of what it takes to provision, operate, maintain, troubleshoot this full-featured network. Right. So what I'll do is I'll move on and talk a little bit about each one of those elements that we mentioned in a little bit more detail to kind of connect the dots for folks. And before I do that, I will just double click a little bit on what the cloud exchange point is, because many times people don't quite understand what is the cloud exchange point. Is this a router that is in the cloud? Is it just something that is managed by a controller? What exactly is a cloud exchange point? So cloud exchange point is in fact an element of a global infrastructure. It's not a single router. It's not a single VNF that is deployed in the cloud, right? It's an entire software architecture that is deployed on top of the cloud provider infrastructure. It's autonomous. It has its own data plane, control plane, and management plane elements, right? And it operates, as I mentioned earlier, just like the point of presence. And unlike a single router VNF with an operating system, it's a combination of software elements leveraging cloud native capabilities that are cohesively working together to enable these globally distributed points of presence. It's completely software, it's completely built in the cloud, and it's completely offered as a service. So there's nothing that organizations need to invest in order to get these CXPs and connect to those CXPs, right? As a service, there's no software that needs to be downloaded from any marketplace. There's no hardware that needs to be bought in order to connect to those cloud exchange points. So all of these are pretty cool elements of what cloud exchange point really is. And as I mentioned, it's a really software stack, the Alkira innovation, that brings this set of capabilities in order to build this network for the cloud era that I mentioned in a previous slide. So I think that's pretty cool, Adam. I'm not sure if you've seen something like that before, but love to hear your thoughts about, what do you think about the cloud exchange point?
So, David, one of the things, right, like obviously there are so many differences between AWS native cloud network services and what the Alkira product offers. And what I really like about the Alkira product is how it simplifies AWS networking for people who might be either new to cloud networking, right? Perhaps they have an extensive background in networking, but they're brand new to AWS, or for anyone who really just needs a clean, efficient, and more automated, streamlined way to manage their network. And with the Cloud Exchange Point, it really gives you a lot of that flexibility that you wouldn't otherwise have.
Right. That's great. That's awesome. That's how we see it too. All right. So let me do this. Let me walk you guys through a few more elements. So now we've kind of established the baseline of the Alkira solution and the key element of the cloud exchange point. So let's see what kind of services Alkira offers for AWS. So I'm going to walk you through some of these. Not in great detail, because obviously each one of them is a world of its own, but just to give you a glimpse of, before we do the demo, just to give you a glimpse of what is that Alkira brings to the AWS, exactly along the lines, Adam, that you mentioned around simplicity and the agility, right? So the first one that we typically see our customers are going for is, of course, they need to connect cloud workloads, right? And that's what you see in here. In AWS VPC, it has what we call a cloud connector that connects to the closest cloud exchange point. And if you recall, this cloud exchange point is a global network riding over the Alkira cloud backbone. So by connecting this AWS VPC, we are deciding on the capacity that is needed. We're deciding on the segment that this VPC resides in, because we support segmentation. And as you're going to see in the demonstration, the segmentation is an end-to-end concept. So right here on the left, you see a remote CXP with some other elements connected to it. And this segmentation is extended all the way throughout the Alkira cloud backbone. So as easy as connecting this AWS VPC and all the routing elements that come along with it, right? And that routing is the routing of the CXPs themselves and the routing that occurs on the AWS VPC itself, obviously local subnets and some routing entries in the routing table that point, well, in this case, a default route into the CXP, and the CXP accepts this traffic over the cloud connector and obviously routes this to the external or the subnets that reside wherever that the destination traffic goes, right? And the remote CXPs, of course, are pointing to the AWS VPC prefixes that are available through this connector, right? So really kind of a fully globally routed solution when these VPCs are onboarded. Now, we understand that nothing is greenfield. So this VPC can also have a brownfield. Of course, it could have its own different maybe routing table that points certain routes to, let's say, direct connect or through some sideways VPN connection. So there's, of course, through BGW, there's, of course, kind of different permutations of the design, but we are seeing customers who are, it's not kind of all or nothing, like you got to put all of your eggs in one basket and just send everything to Alkira. There could be some ways where the brownfield integration still exists for either short-term or long-term, and that is accommodated through the VPC routing that is done on the AWS VPC. So that onboards, basically globally onboards these AWS VPCs into the network. Now, what else can we onboard? Well, what about the on-premises, right? Okay, because we mentioned that earlier, is that yes, all the cloud workloads have been onboarded, and now, of course, everything that has been onboarded can communicate. But what about on-premises stuff? Well, great. What are the options you have in there? And the two most prominent options we see around are the IPsec connectors that are coming from remote sites, and the SD-WAN connectors that come from our SD-WAN partners, right? And of course, these are very different entities, but the underlying principle is the same. It's a type of a connector, it's a type of a connectivity from either the fabric or an individual site into the closest Alkira CXP. In case of SD-WAN, the SD-WAN traffic, the SD-WAN fabric could be regionalized and have multiple touch points into the Alkira CXPs, meaning that it could be connecting to multiple Alkira Cloud Exchange points in order to regionalize that traffic. Could be one single fabric that touches the Alkira infrastructure in multiple places. It could be different regional SD-WAN fabrics that are interconnected through the Alkira cloud backbone. It could be from the same SD-WAN vendor or multiple SD-WAN vendors. So there's a lot of kind of permutations of this design, but the fundamental principle is the same: attaching your on-premises workload sites, fabrics into the closest Alkira Cloud Exchange point with elements of the sizing of the connections, the segmentation, the elements of routing and firewall insertion, and of course, like we mentioned in the cloud, the ability to do brownfield, where those sites or fabrics could have their connections to the traditional data centers and basically coexist with an Alkira deployment. And by doing dynamic routing exchange, we can make sure that the prefixes that are residing on the Alkira network are routed through the connectors to Alkira, and everything else is kind of routed through to the existing environment. Right. So cloud connectors and on-premises connectors. You mentioned direct connect, Adam. Right. It's definitely we are seeing that there's a fair amount of customers who have direct connects today, and they're asking, well, what do we do with this direct connect, right? So how can a direct connect connection coexist with the Alkira service offering? So in this case, what we're doing, we are enabling these customers who have an existing co-location deployments with direct connect, and thankfully, like you mentioned, Adam, there's plenty of those, plenty of locations where these direct connects are available. And what we're doing is we are building on top of the direct connect architecture by providing an encrypted, segmented, and dynamically routed connections between the co-locations and through these co-locations to kind of the rest of our customers' network. So those co-locations with those direct connects are basically onboarded into the Alkira's cloud exchange points. So rather than direct connect being something that connects you to the AWS VPCs directly, it connects you into the cloud exchange point, and through the cloud exchange point, the rest of the network becomes available to you. And like I said, high speed encryption, segmentation, dynamic routing, firewall service insertion, high availability, all of those are kind of elements that are both leveraging what you guys are doing from the underlying direct connect standpoint, and also things that we are bringing as a service that we operate on top. So I think that's pretty cool. Now, security. Let me touch a bit on security. Now, so far, basically, what we've seen is an onboarding of the cloud workloads, the onboarding of the on-premises sites, the onboarding of direct connects. That's in case you have co-locations. So, what about security, right? So, how is security integrated? And I did mention that earlier, is that the onboarding of the security services into the Alkira cloud exchange points is basically completely automated by Alkira through the process of the marketplace of services. And once this these segments are deployed within the environment, right? And because it's firewalling, but firewalling is sometimes augmented by segmentation. So once these segments are created, they by default are not allowed to communicate to each other unless there is obviously policies that allow that communication to occur. So the segments are not allowed to communicate, but even what happens within those segments, right? This communication that occurs between kind of the elements connected to the cloud exchange point, that traffic could be steered to those cloud firewalls deployed in cloud exchange points. And Alkira really takes care of not only the cloud firewalling part, which is the instantiating the firewalls, lifecycle managing those firewalls, license management for those firewalls, high availability and autoscale of these firewalls, but also steering the traffic to those firewalls based on the intent-based policies. And symmetrically steering the traffic, it becomes a challenge in distributed environments. And as you can see in here, there's basically kind of two segments: the engineering segment and a sales segment. And the segments cannot communicate with each other because that's the purpose that we had those segments. But within the engineering segments, they are subdivided into microsegments where developers and applications, and this could be cloud applications residing on AWS or in on-premises applications that are residing in the data centers, and maybe AWS services such as S3 buckets, right? Those are subdivided in the engineering segment, and the policies that are deployed can govern the communication between these microsegments through the security zones on the firewalls themselves. And the same manner can occur within the sales segment, where you have sales folks that are maybe connecting through remote VPN and accessing the sales tools. So it's a pretty kind of nifty solution to allow cloud firewalling to exist within the Alkira environment, and to provide this security and segmentation services to workloads that are residing on AWS. Some of the applications that are accessed, they're actually accessed through a public internet, right? And that we call a cloud DMZ, which is imagine a non-VPN users that need to access application workloads that are residing within either AWS environments or within the on-premises environments. These application workloads needs to be accessible from to external users, right? These external users are arriving over the internet connection, obviously hitting a cloud exchange point, and need to be properly routed to those application workloads, right? And operating this entire solution as a service, of course, we offer that element of that as a service as well. And we've really taken care of all the kind of fundamental things that customers would be struggling with in regard to assigning public IP addresses, DNS entries, network address translation, embedded segmentation and firewalling, and load balancing across multiple application workloads. Right, something that is pretty cool. And again, like we talked about, the services that are moving to the cloud. Now, the cloud DMZ or a DMZ makes no sense to keep that in the data center, because the application workloads are primarily moving to the cloud. So the transition of that DMZ into the cloud environment makes perfect sense and kind of works really nicely together with the transition of the network services from the data center into the cloud. Another interesting thing that we're seeing is partner connectivity and sometimes mergers and acquisitions. So these are, again, kind of similar to the cloud DMZ environment. And these are external entities that need to be provided access into the internal resources and potentially shared application resources or shared application services across multiple partners, or maybe something that services multiple M&As, right? So in this case, think about this as an extranet services that allow you to segment all of this partner connectivity or the mergers and acquisitions, segment them out into their own segments, provide firewall service insertion for inspecting that traffic, providing cross-segment routing in the cloud, which is really kind of an advanced cloud networking topic, but provide this cross-segment routing in order to allow these extranet segments to talk to these enterprise segments. And of course, because these are external entities connecting to your shared application services, doing things like resolving overlapping IP addresses to make sure that we don't have an IP conflict or IP addressing conflicts between multiple partners connecting to the shared application resource, or multiple M&As that were performed and coming from the same IP space, right? And you don't have a luxury to go and re-IP those in a short term, right? So solutions around overlapping IP addresses and using network address translation in order to overcome that. So that's another really interesting use case that we're seeing.
So David, I find if you could go back one slide, thank you. So what I find really interesting or really useful is the ability to overcome the overlapping IP addresses, right? And we talk about during mergers and acquisitions, we talk about partners and things like that, and the use case there. But I can't tell you how many times that I've run into customers where you have different development teams running in different VPCs, all under the same house,
Right.
that end up getting duplicate IP addresses, sometimes even in the same region, right? And then all of a sudden, somebody comes in and they're like, we need to move these into the same VPC, or we need more, or we need to establish connectivity between these two microservices that we built, and they're in different VPCs. Could you expand on how you're able to accomplish the overlapping IP issue?
Right. It's a little bit of a different use case than what I mentioned so far, because this was like in the context of an extranet. But you're absolutely right. Overlapping CIDRs is something that we really, really commonly see across across the environment, where people basically did not have this global network that connects all of these VPCs together. So having overlapping IP address was not an issue, because each one of them had, let's say, their own internet gateway, which just gets them out, nets them out to the internet, and they never communicate to each other, right? So the IP conflict was not a big deal. But now that people are combining all of these VPCs into one cohesive network, all of a sudden, these overlapping CIDRs are really coming to bite them, right? And we obviously we don't have enough time to dive too deep into this, but yes, it's along the lines of detecting those overlapping IPs that exist in different VPCs that are being attached to Alkira. So it's detecting those, alerting the administrator about the presence of those overlapping IP addresses, right? So an administrator is aware, and obviously taking a remediative action of making sure that these IP address resolution or IP address conflicts are resolved, right? And that is commonly done through just employing a network address translation in order to make sure source and destination and network address translation in order to make sure that these overlapping IP addresses are no longer an issue when VPCs with overlapping CIDRs are communicating. So you're absolutely right. The case around overlapping IP addresses expands beyond just extranets. That's a good point, Adam. Thank you for bringing it up.
No, thanks for expanding on it, David.
Sure. Yeah. So remote access is another one. We're seeing that organizations are basically having need to not just connect sites that we mentioned earlier, but also connect individual remote users. And this could be their individual employees. They could be partners. These could be guests coming to the facilities if those facilities kind of open up for accepting that. So different kind of types of this remote users that are really have to access those enterprise applications wherever they are, either in on-premises data centers, AWS cloud environments, or even SaaS, right? And provide this kind of a centralized access to those with maybe security policy enforcement in the middle, right? So again, using zero trust network access to provide this kind of a global footprint of this remote access VPN capabilities with integrated security elements, with multi-factor authentication, auto-scaling, micro-segmentation, firewall service insertion, all of that, we're seeing that as another mean of kind of a last mile connectivity into the enterprise application workloads. And lastly is another topic which doesn't come very often because not everybody's doing that, but some folks do, right? Is that leveraging this Lambda functions on AWS that rely on this kind of distributed high-speed connectivity to make sure that this Lambda functions can invoke services that reside in either AWS environment or an on-premises environment. And the Lambda functions are, of course, handled by the compute or cloud administrators, cloud architects. And where Alkira solution comes in here is really to give the foundational networking and security services that allow these Lambda functions to invoke this distributed services, right? So it's really kind of nifty way of looking at how things that are not traditionally thought as as would have a very kind of significant implication from networking standpoint. At the end of the day, as we all know, networking is it's foundational for a lot of things, right? So you can have a Lambda function calling a service that is unreachable, right? So having those reside on this global Alkira service definitely enables that capability. All right. Last, before we jump into a quick demo, is from consumption standpoint, Alkira's Cloud Services Exchange solution is available on the marketplace, right? So anybody who just goes into the AWS marketplace, I know it's a big deal, goes and can go and just search for Alkira Cloud Service Exchange, or maybe just Alkira, and found the offering. And it's a SaaS type of service. As we said, it's an as-a-service solution. It's not sort of like a do-it-yourself type of thing. It's an as-a-service solution. Subscribe to that and basically consume that through the marketplace. And what's really cool is that it's really simple consumption because it's a marketplace. It's a consolidated billing for all of your compute, AWS compute resources that you would be consuming through the marketplace, and now also adding networking and security. So really create this one kind of uniform billing experience from compute, storage, networking, security, kind of all in one billing. So it's really convenient. All right. Now let me do a quick demo. So this is our demo topology, right? And I'm going to be trying to accomplish quite a few things in here, right? I'm going to be establishing a backbone that stretches across two regions, US East and US West. I'm going to be defining segmentation, attaching VPCs, internet exit, deploying firewalls, adding remote sites, adding intent-based policies to steer traffic to the firewall, all kind of different cool things. And the twist is I'm going to time myself, right, and see how fast I can achieve all of these steps that otherwise would have taken, well, I don't even know how long, but probably weeks, and in some cases more than that. Depends on where your starting point is. So let's see how you can do this with Alkira. To the Alkira Cloud Services Exchange where our account was created. We are presented with a map of the world where we can select the locations where our network is going to be present. In this particular case, let's select two locations, one in US East and one in US West. We're taken to the design canvas. In here, we can design all of our networking and security elements. The first step, let's add a new segment. We already have a default segment, but let's add a new custom one. We're going to call this Finance and assign an IP address block for internal purposes. Let's save the changes and go back to the design canvas. Now, segments are end-to-end. There's no need to create segment per location. Finance segment now spans an entire network. Let's add AWS workloads. We need to authenticate to an AWS account. In this case, we can use role-based or key-based. We're going to use key-based for simplicity and choose the AWS region. The system is going to walk the account and get the list of VPCs we can onboard. Let's select one of the VPCs and provide a couple of pieces of information that are required to onboard the VPC, such as the capacity, the network capacity required for that VPC, the target segment, the group for policy application, and a billing tag for billing purposes. Now VPC has been added. Let us show you how simple it is to add another VPC. We're going to choose a different region. This time it's the East Coast region. Select the authentication mechanism. Select an AWS region, this time Ohio, and let the system discover VPCs. Let's select the VPC from the list, and again provide a couple of pieces of information, such as network capacity, the target segments, the target group for policy application, and the billing tags. Let's save and go back to the canvas. Both VPCs can now communicate to each other even though they are in two different AWS regions. Let's add an internet exit point in case one of the VPCs needs access to internet. So we're going to define an internet connector. In this case, assign it to finance segment because that's where VPCs are, assign billing tag, and save. Now VPCs can communicate to each other and have an internet exit. But what about security? Let's go to the Alkira Services Marketplace and select the Palo Alto Networks Firewall. Alkira completely automates the provisioning and lifecycle of the Palo Alto VM series firewalls deployed in the Alkira Cloud Exchange points. Because we'll be using Panorama for management, we need to provide a couple of pieces of information. Autoscaling is advantageous if the system needs to autoscale the firewall deployment to accommodate rising and lowering capacity needs for the application traffic. Selecting the VM series type, the software version, and creating the administrative account for those firewalls. For Panorama to successfully manage the VM series firewalls, we need to provide the authentication keys. One key per firewall. Now let's provide a couple of more pieces of information. First is the sizing of the firewalls and the segment where the firewalls are going to be servicing the application traffic along with the management segment. Let's select billing tag for billing purposes and save. Now the firewall has been added to the system, but we have not yet sent any traffic to it. So let's define intent-based policies in order to do that. The first policy we're going to define is going to be for inter-region traffic between the two VPCs. We're going to give a policy a name, select a segment where that policy is going to be active, finance, and select to and from fields. This is defining the traffic between the VPC in the AWS Oregon region and the VPC in AWS Ohio region. All the traffic is going to be sent to the Palo Alto firewalls. Let's enable the policy and save. It was that easy. But what about internet traffic? Let's define another policy. This policy is going to be for the traffic that goes between the AWS VPC in Oregon region and internet. Let's select the segment, both are in finance. Select an AWS VPC in Oregon and internet as from and to. As you can see, the highlighting happens on the left, so you can see which objects are being affected by the policy. In this case, the non-business critical traffic is going to be blocked by the system, and only business relevant traffic is going to be sent to the firewall for a stateful inspection. Now we are back at the design canvas. The cloud is done. But what about an on-premise environment? Things need to connect to the cloud. There are several connectors that we can define on the on-premises side. Let's use IPsec connector. We'll define a new site. This time it's San Jose site. The San Jose site has a router that terminates an internet connection. We need to define the IP address, the public IP address that router receives on its interface towards the internet. The site is important. It has two routers. Let's define a second router and give a second gateway IP address in order for an IPsec to be established. Now routing needs to occur. We're going to use BGP for dynamically exchanging routes between the San Jose remote site and the cloud network. We define the BGP autonomous system, define sizing for how much network capacity is going to be allowed to that site, define the segment we're going to put the site in, and that's it. The site is connected. Now the site can communicate to all of the cloud workloads and the internet. But what about security again? Can we insert security for that communication as well? Of course. Let's define a new policy. This policy is going to inspect the traffic from the branch location from San Jose site to both of the cloud workloads in US East and US West regions. It's going to be in a finance segment. The source is going to be San Jose site, and the destination is going to be a group of two cloud workloads, one in the US East, one in US West. We're going to send this traffic to the Palo Alto firewall. Non-business relevant traffic is going to be dropped by the system. Let's save it. We are done.
All right. That was 7 minutes, and I wasn't cheating either. I was trying not to go too fast to give it a kind of a more realistic experience. But as you can see, I was able to achieve all this variety of tasks that otherwise would have taken long time in about 7 minutes or so. So I think that was pretty impressive. The one thing that I did not show in the demonstration is really the ability to provide this deep operational visibility, control, and governance to every single element of the solution. And that extends through the infrastructure, the application use, the flow level intelligence, the extensive troubleshooting tools, the routing, global routing visibility, the visibility around firewall services, and many more features, right? So operations visibility is extremely important, especially to enterprises, and we kind of operate this as a service. At the same time, we give the enterprises the full breadth and depth of operational visibility, maintenance, troubleshooting tools for them to treat this as a full-featured enterprise network. So we wrap it up with just key takeaways of what we've seen today, which is really the enterprise-grade networking that is relying on the cloud provider, extensive cloud provider capabilities, and we've seen those. Adam, thank you for walking us through in the beginning about the greatness of AWS global infrastructure and the networking services that are natively provided by AWS, and really we take this to the next level with enterprise-grade networking for the AWS environments, the extreme simplification and the agility that you have seen throughout the presentation and throughout the demo itself, the as-a-service consumption, which is very much synergetic with the way that in cloud itself is consumed, creates a great synergy between cloud environments, which are consumed as a service, and now networking and security that is consumed as a service. And all of that is available through the AWS Marketplace for consolidated consumption, simple consolidated consumption, one-stop shop for all cloud and now networking and security needs. So we invite everybody to visit alkira.com/demo and request your own personalized demo of the solution and see how you can reinvent your network for the cloud era. So I wanted to thank everybody for attending. Adam, special thanks to you for partnering and for providing AWS insights.
It was my pleasure, David. Thanks again for inviting me to do this. I'd love to come back, do this again another time. Maybe we'll talk about something different. But it's always a great opportunity to come talk with partners and customers about partner solutions. What you all are doing here is some great stuff. It really helps to simplify networking for a lot of our customers that have challenges with it. So I'm just happy I could be here and happy to expand on what I was able to.
You bet. Thank you so much, Adam, for the partnership, and to everybody else, have a great day.
All right. Take care, David. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.